He was already sweating when the pain hit again. A sharp twist, a deep warning. Caleb Hartley pressed his hand to the stone wall and closed his eyes, breathing through shame and fear at the same time. Dot around him. Boots echoed. Laughter dripped. A ship waited. Everyone else was ready to sail. He was not. If he missed this crossing, he would miss everything. But if he stepped on that ship, his body promised disaster. So he stayed behind, alone, bent over with a weakness he could not control, and, without knowing it, that weakness was about to crown him king. Why did a man's worst night save an entire throne? The year was 1120, and the royal court was preparing to leave the port town of Silverhaven, a busy harbor on the cold northern coast. King Roland I had finished his business across the sea and was eager to return home. His nobles were restless, his servants were loud. His son, the young heir Julian Rowan, was glowing with confidence and wine. A new ship waited for them. It was called the Ivory Star. The vessel was fast, beautiful, and proudly built. Fresh timber, clean sails, the kind of ship people trusted without question. Most of the young nobles demanded passage on it, eager to race ahead of the slower fleet. They drank early. They laughed louder. They believed nothing bad could touch them. Among the crowd was Caleb Hartley, the king's nephew. Not famous, not powerful, barely noticed. He stood near the dock, pale and silent, fighting a losing battle inside his own body. He had been sick all day, not the kind of sickness that earns sympathy, the kind that keeps you near walls and shadows, the kind that strips dignity fast. Every step toward the ship brought another cramp, another warning. His face burned with embarrassment as laughter swelled behind him. No visions came to him. No voices spoke. Just pain, just pain, just pain. Or he turned away while the Ivory Star pulled from the dock under moonlight and drunken cheers. Caleb stayed behind, hunched and miserable, listening to the sea without him. Before dawn, the sea took its payment. The ship struck hidden rock not far from shore. The hull split. Cold water rushed in. Panic replaced laughter in seconds. The sea does not care about names or bloodlines. Nearly everyone aboard drowned, including Julian Rowan, the king's only legitimate son, by morning. The harbor whispered instead of shouted. The throne stood empty. Caleb learned the news while sitting on the floor of a borrowed room. Weak and shaken, he did not cheer. He did not thank fate. He stared at the wall and listened as bells rang for the dead. His survival felt wrong. King Roland never recovered from the loss. He ruled a few more years, quieter, older, haunted. When he died, there was no clear heir, the court argued. The nobles delayed. Promises made years earlier were suddenly forgotten. Across the water, the king's daughter Maravale had been named. Successor oaths had been sworn, but she was far away, and distance is a dangerous thing when crowns are involved. Caleb moved fast. He crossed the sea, gathered allies, and arrived in the capital before anyone could stop him. He spoke calmly. He smiled when needed. He did not mention the ship. He did not mention his stomach. Within weeks, Caleb Hartley was crowned king. Caleb I. The kingdom did not settle. Maravale did not accept the theft of her crown. She returned with an army and a cause, and the land cracked open under years of war. Neighbors turned on each other. Castles changed hands. Loyalty shifted with the wind. They called it the Long Fracture. For nearly 2 decades, the country burned slowly. Caleb was captured once, chained and humiliated, then traded back like a bargaining chip. Mara ruled briefly but never secured the crown. Nothing stayed stable for long. Caleb ruled the way a man does, when he never expected to rule at all. He gave away land to Islay. He trusted too quickly. When betrayed, he forgave. His court grew chaotic. Strong lords became stronger, weaker. Towns suffered, yet people did not hate him. He showed mercy when others would not. He listened. He hesitated. Sometimes he brought food to negotiations when weapons were expected. It made him human. It also made him ineffective. His wife, Eleanor, of Northmere, carried what he could not. When Caleb was imprisoned, she governed. When armies marched, she rode with them. Quiet, firm, unyielding. Many wondered if the kingdom had chosen the wrong Hartley to crown. Time wore everyone down. Caleb's only son died young, not dramatically, just gone. But that loss, the fight, drained out of the land. Deals were made in tired rooms by tired men. Mara's son, Henry Vale, was named heir. Caleb would rule until death. Then the crown would pass cleanly. Caleb died in 1154, not hated, not loved, simply finished. The war ended with him. History did not give him songs. No statues rose. His name rarely stirs pride. Yet everything hinged on one night. A man doubled over in pain. A ship he could not board. A weakness that became a doorway. If his body had behaved, the kingdom would have followed another line entirely. Sometimes history turns not on swords or speeches, but on the quiet mercy of being left behind. And the night Caleb stayed ashore was only the first reminder that crowns often rise from the most unlikely failures. The chain clinked before the growl came. Low, wet, patient, everyone in the stone yard froze as the massive white shape shifted in the shadows. King Aldrich Rowan did not step back. He smiled, slow and satisfied, as the beast lifted its head and stared at him with dark, unblinking eyes. "Let it breathe," Aldrich said softly. The handlers hesitated. The animal pulled against iron links, claws scraping stone. Frost steamed from its mouth, though the day was warm. This was not a symbol. This was not a story. This was a living nightmare on four legs. And Aldrich Rowan, crowned ruler of the realm, had chosen it as his prize. Why would a king keep a monster beside his throne? Aldrich Rowan became king as a child, 9 years old. Too small for the crown, too young for the weight. His father had died in the middle of rebellion, leaving a fractured kingdom and a frightened court behind him. Men bowed to Aldrich because they had no better option. The early years of his rule were not his own. Regents argued, councils schemed, foreign powers pressed close. Aldrich listened, learned, and waited. By the time he reached manhood, the kingdom was quieter but poorer, drained by years of careful survival. And Aldrich decided survival was not enough. He wanted wonder. He wanted the world to look at his court and believe something impossible lived there. That was when the gift arrived. From the frozen north came emissaries, bearing tribute, furs, ivory, and a living creature, pulled on chains, massive and pale as fresh snow. The men called it a white bat, born where the sea turns to ice. Aldrich's breath caught when he saw it. Most men would have refused. The cost alone was ruinous, the danger undeniable. But Aldrich saw more than teeth and muscle. He saw fear. He saw a spectacle. He saw power made flesh. The bear was installed within the stone tower at the heart of the capital, caged beside lions already kept for display. Chains were reinforced, handlers paid, guards posted. The city whispered. Some nights Aldrich stood above the enclosure, listening to the animal breathe. It was not the only creature he collected. Soon there were great cats from the south, long-necked beasts from distant plains, birds that screamed at dawn, creatures few had words for. The tower became a place of marvel and dread, where visiting envoys were led first, before councils or feasts. Behold, Aldrich would say, and they would. But while his menagerie grew, the kingdom strained. Aldrich loved stone and ceremony more than numbers. He rebuilt temples while towns begged for grain. He commissioned grand halls while debts piled quietly behind tapestries. His faith was deep. His sense of cost was not. When the treasury thinned, he borrowed. When borrowing failed, he demanded. Taxes rose. Appointments went to foreign cousins who flattered well but governed poorly. The nobles began to mutter. They called him gentle, then naive, then dangerous in a softer way. When Aldrich announced plans to expand his menagerie further, some laughed openly, others clenched fists. It was not the animals they feared, it was the message. A king who collects wonders while his people struggle sends a clear signal about priorities. The breaking point came slowly, like a crack spreading through stone. A coalition of lords forced Aldrich to sign agreements, limiting his power. He nodded, smiled, and signed. Later, he tried to pull free of those promises. War followed, brief, sharp, personal. Aldrich was captured during a winter march, escorted not to a dungeon but to his own capital under guard. For a year, others ruled in his name. His son Edward Rowan watched and learned. When Aldrich was restored, the bear still lived. Expense records mention its upkeep, chains replaced, meat delivered, a rope long enough to allow it into the river to fish under watchful eyes. The people gathered to stare as the beast plunged into water, powerful and free for brief moments. It terrified them, it delighted them, it reminded them who paid for such wonders. Aldrich ruled long, 56 years in all. He outlasted enemies, reforms, and rebellions. He prayed daily, he fasted often, he believed himself humble, even as gold bled from the ground beneath his feet. When he died in 1272, the animals remained. Kings came and went. The Stone Tower's collection grew, inherited, and expanded. Over generations, it became something else entirely, a place of public curiosity. The seed of a permanent menagerie. People would one day call it a zoo. But it began with one king and one impossible animal. The bear's final days are unrecorded. No tale of escape, no tragedy preserved. Only lines and ledges, noting food and chains and care, enough to know it lived, enough to know it mattered. Aldrich Rowan is remembered as a dreamer, a man of faith and spectacle, a ruler who wanted his kingdom to feel enchanted even as it struggled to breathe. He did not conquer lands. He did not crush rebellions with cruelty. He built beauty, while the world burned quietly around him. Some kings rule through fear, some through strength. Aldrich ruled through wonder. And somewhere deep in the Stone Tower, long after the chains were gone, the echo of heavy breathing lingered, reminding the realm that power does not always roar through armies. Sometimes it growls behind iron bars, fed by the crown itself. Asterisk. The door closed without ceremony. No slam, no speech, just wood meeting stone. Marian Hawthorne did not cry out. She stood still as the lock turned, listening to freedom shrink behind her. When the footsteps faded, the silence felt heavier than chains. 16 years. That was how long the king would keep her, not because she was weak, but because she was not. How did the most powerful woman in the realm become a prisoner of her own crown? King Roland Hawthorne ruled more land than any man of his age. From the northern hills to the southern coast, banners bore his mark. He was tireless, sharp-minded, always moving. Laws bent around his will. Messengers rode until horses collapsed. He believed in order. He believed in control. And once, he believed in Marian. Marian Vale of Southmere was no ordinary bride. She came to Roland already crowned by experience. She had ruled lands in her own name, commanded loyalty without asking, and spoken in councils where men twice her age listened carefully. When they married, the realm gasped. Together, they were unstoppable. Their lands doubled. Their influence stretched beyond borders. They had 8 children, loud and brilliant and dangerous in their ambition. For a while, they were a storm that moved as one. But storms tear themselves apart. Roland wanted obedience. Marian wanted partnership. Roland ruled by command. Marian ruled by presence. He expected her to stand beside him and smile. She expected to stand beside him and decide, and neither would bend. Roland took comfort elsewhere. Quietly at first, then openly. Marian withdrew to her southern lands, ruling from a distance, proving she did not need his shadow to govern well. That frightened him. When their sons grew restless, hungry for titles and power, Marian listened. She advised. She encouraged. She remembered what it meant to rule without permission. In 1173, the family broke. 3 sons rebelled against their father. Castles rose in defiance. Allies gathered. Letters moved in secret. And behind it all stood Marian, not with a sword, but with resolve that the rebellion failed. Roland crushed it with brutal efficiency. Armies scattered. Sons begged forgiveness. Roland granted it, carefully measured, politically useful. But Marian, he could not forgive her. She was captured while fleeing, stopped not by soldiers but by inevitability. Roland did not shout. He did not strike. He ordered the door closed, and so began her long disappearance. Marian was not thrown into a dungeon that would have been too honest. Instead, she was moved between strongholds, always guarded, always watched. She had books, she had servants, She had comfort shaped like a cage. She could not leave. She could not rule. She could not see her children grow. Roland brought her out for ceremonies, holidays, appearances that required the illusion of unity. She wore fine clothes. She smiled when required. Then she was taken back, quietly, like an object returned to storage. Years passed. Roland aged. His temper sharpened. He rode constantly, chased enemies that changed names but never meaning. His sons turned against each other, exactly as Marian had warned. And still, the door stayed closed. 16 winters, 16 summers. Marian learned patience deeper than anger. She listened, she waited, she watched power unravel without her hand guiding it. Roland died in 1189. Worn out by war, betrayal, and regret he never admitted aloud. The lock turned for the last time. Their son, King Daniel Hawthorne, ordered Marian, freed on his first day as ruler. She was 67 when she stepped fully into the open air again. She did not waste time. While Daniel left on campaign, Marian ruled. She raised money. She negotiated alliances. She crushed plots with words alone. When Daniel was captured abroad, Marian crossed borders herself, gathered ransom, and brought him home. She ruled harder in old age than most men ever had. Marian lived into her 80s. She wrote letters until her hands shook. She advised kings. She chose exile only when she was done. Roland is remembered as a great reformer, a builder of systems, a man who shaped law. Marian is remembered as something rarer, a woman who lost 16 years and still outlived the power that tried to silence her. Their love, once fierce, collapsed under the weight of control. Letters between them hint at warmth, regret, something broken but never fully dead. But Roland chose authority over equality, and authority is a lonely thing. When Marian finally died, she was buried with dignity, not bitterness. She had won in the only way that mattered. She endured. Some rulers fall in battle, some fade quietly, some imprison what they cannot command, and sometimes the longest victory belongs not to the king who locked the door but to the woman who waited for it to open. Asterisk. The arrow struck without warning. No drumbeat, no charge, just a sudden breath stolen from his chest. Marcus Linos staggered back, surprised, more than afraid. He looked down at the shaft, buried deep in his shoulder, red already blooming around the wound. For a moment, he almost laughed. This was not how legends ended. He had survived deserts, sieges, and holy wars. He had watched cities fall and armies scatter, and now he stood exposed beneath a quiet stone wall, wounded by a boy he could barely see. Who brings down a king with one small act of revenge? Marcus Lionel ruled more by reputation than presence. He wore the crown, but rarely the land beneath it. He spoke the tongue of the South better than his own people's speech and treated kingship like an obligation that interrupted war. Battle was where he felt alive. Tall, fearless, terrifying. When angered, chroniclers called him a living lion, all strength and motion. Soldiers followed him because he never hesitated. Enemies feared him because mercy was never guaranteed. When Marcus was not fighting, he was preparing to fight again. He had crossed seas to wage holy war. He had earned respect even from those who opposed him. He had also earned debt, enemies, and a kingdom drained to keep him armored and moving. But none of that killed him. After years abroad, captivity, ransom, and return, Marcus rode once more. Through his southern lands, a minor lord had refused to surrender a cache of treasure found beneath old stone. Marcus considered this a personal insult. So he laid siege to a small fortress called Ashmont Keep. It was barely defensible. A stone shell, a handful of defenders, nothing worthy of a king's time. Marcus loved reminders of dominance. He walked the perimeter without armor, laughing with his men, inspecting walls like a man who believed the world had already agreed to spare him. On the battlements stood a boy. No armor, no banner, just rage and memory. His father and brothers had been killed by Marcus's soldiers months earlier. The siege was not politics to him. It was personal. As evening fell, the boy raised his crossbow. The bolt flew clean. Marcus tore it. Free himself, teeth clenched, refusing help, he dismissed the injury as nothing, a scratch, a story to tell later. He returned to his tent and drank through the night, brushing off the growing heat in his flesh. Confection does not care about courage. Days passed, the wound darkened, fever took hold. His mind wandered between clarity and delirium. The greatest warrior of his age lay sweating on core sheets, whispering commands to enemies long gone. On April 6, 1199, Marcus Lino died. The boy was brought before him before the end. Marcus, pale and burning, ordered the youth spared. Forgiveness, spoken softly, felt like a final gesture of control. It did not last. After Marcus died, one of his commanders had the boy executed brutally. Forgiveness expired with the king. The realm reeled. Marcus had named his brother Julian his heir. Despite once admitting Julian was unfit to rule, there were no better options. Power passed to weaker hands. The lands Marcus had held through fear and motion began to slip away. His mother, Eleanor Lionel, already old, stepped in once more. She negotiated, she soothed, she held the kingdom together while her son's legacy unraveled. Marcus was buried in pieces. His body rested beside his parents. His heart was placed elsewhere. His remains scattered like the empire he never stayed long enough to protect. Songs remembered him as noble, brave, Chivalrous. History remembers more. He slaughtered prisoners. He bankrupted his crown. He ruled through violence and charisma, not care. He inspired Ayuba, but left little behind that could stand without him. And yet, a single boy ended him. No army, no assassin's blade, just grief sharpened into aim. Marcus Lino lived as a legend and died as a man, undone by the very arrogance that carried him so far. Power makes noise, revenge waits quietly, and sometimes the smallest hands leave the deepest marks on history. Asterisk, asterisk. They tried to close the lid gently. It did not work. The monks hesitated, exchanged looks, then pushed harder. Stone scraped, wood groaned, and in that terrible moment, the body inside answered back. The sound was wet, final, unmistakable. Gas filled the church. Men staggered away, gagging, prayers breaking apart. Mid-sentence, what was meant to be a holy farewell dissolved into chaos and horror. This was how Edmund the Conqueror left the world. Too large, too swollen, too human. How did the most feared king in the realm end as a warning no one could ignore? Edmund of Ironmere had never fit easily into anything. Not into expectations. Not into mercy. Not even into peace. Born the illegitimate son of a northern duke, Edmund learned early that power was not given, it was taken. He crushed rivals before they could grow bold. He ruled his homeland with such force that rebellion became unthinkable. When the southern throne fell vacant, Edmund claimed it by right of strength. He crossed the sea with hardened soldiers, defeated the last defending king in open battle, and crowned himself ruler before the year was done. The realm changed overnight. Edmund reordered land, language, and loyalty. He replaced old nobles with his own. He built fortresses of stone where wooden halls once stood. He catalogued everything worth owning, every field, every coin, every family. Fear worked, efficiency followed, but time is not impressed by conquest. As Edmund aged, his body swelled, chroniclers whispered, rivals mocked. He struggled to mount a horse without help. Pain followed him like a shadow he could no longer outrun. Still, he rode to war. In 1087, while campaigning through a rebellious valley, his horse stumbled over burning debris. Edmund was thrown forward, slammed hard against the saddle's pommel. Something inside him tore. He did not die quickly. Carried to a nearby city, he lingered for weeks, bloated and failing, the smell of decay already clinging to him. He confessed sins. He made gifts to churches. He divided his lands among his sons, ensuring future conflict with calm precision. On September 9th, Edmund the Conqueror died. The chaos did not stop. No one wanted the body. Nobles departed immediately. Servants stripped the palace bare and fled. The king who had terrified a continent lay abandoned, swelling in summer heat, guarded only by monks who did not know what else to do. Eventually, a small procession formed. They carried Edmund to the great abbey he himself had founded. Stone walls rose, candles burned, prayers began. Then they discovered the tomb was too small.